Good morning, Giant Steps people. How is everyone? Are you well? Awesome. I'll let some of you speak for all of you. That's how systems work. I don't know. So I'm Levi Weinhagen. I am a comedy maker, a podcaster. I work with philanthropic folks, and I ask a lot of questions. So that's why I am here to ask these amazing folks a lot of questions. As a moderator, my goal is to mostly get them to talk to each other and for me to just listen, which is something I'm trying to practice more in general as a white man, which is talk less and listen more. So if I have fellow white men out there, I'm going to encourage you to do the same here and out in the world. Hooray, we'll all be victorious together. Great, now I'm a hero. That was not my goal, but I'll take it. So that's enough about me. What I'm going to go ahead and do is introduce each of these folks sitting beside me, and we'll get right into some questions. And then as we go, please think of things you'd like to ask them as well. We will get to some Q&A towards the end, but I really want to encourage you throughout to think of things that you'd like to ask each and every one of these folks, because they all have a deep body of life experiences and work to pull from to answer those questions. So I'm just going to go right in the order of where you're all sitting. That seems to make the most sense. And then I think you each have a microphone, yes? So you'll need to speak into that for everyone to hear you. I think that makes sense. Mostly, yeah. Javier and I know one another. He's going to be giving me a lot of attitude throughout the morning. So to my immediate left is Jamal Hashi. Jamal is a homegrown organic certified from homegrown organic and certified from South Minneapolis. Born to an immigrant single mother who speaks no English. He has created or been a part of 9 restaurants and food trucks, including my West Bank favorite restaurant, Jambo Kitchen. Yes, correct, exactly right. Next to Jamal is Heather Rose Dunning, gold mining, gap finding, boundary pushing explorer. She founded her design firm 20 Below Studio in 2002 and has since gone through a merger, a breakup, a non-compete, and a rebirth. We're going to talk about all that stuff, hopefully. And Heather currently operates Yellow Dog Studio and is working on a new values-based curated created community called Scout Workshop. Next to Heather is Javier Morillo. He's the president of SEIU 26, Minnesota's Property Services Union. He's a storyteller, an organizer, and co-host and creator of the political podcast Wrong About Everything. And next to Javier is Elaine Richardson, aka Docta E, an award-winning professor at Ohio State University. She's an author, a lecturer, a performer, a singer, a songwriter, and one of the most amazing people I've ever met. That is actually true. So first of all, let's hear it for all these folks, Elaine, Javier, Heather, and Jamal. Thank you all for being here and trusting me to sort of frame all the wonderful things you have to share. The title of this conversation is Doing Things the Right Way versus Doing Things Your Way. So my first question to all of you is, what does that actually mean? What do you think that means, the idea of doing something the right way versus doing something your way? I'll open it up to whoever is the most eager to speak. Or I'll call on someone. I'm going to call on Javier.
To me, doing things the right way versus my way, I think that the thing that, when I look at my career, I originally came to Minnesota to teach at Carleton College. I did that for a few years, and 2 years there and at McAllister, and then I changed careers and became an organizer, and now I'm the president of a union of janitors and security officers. And my work in the arts, like there have been moments when something completely crazy is put before me and I have said yes to it, and it has worked out. And so it feels like sort of neither right nor like those two options. Like the thing that has been sort of most defining of my career and the things that have brought me joy in my career is saying yes to things, and then really working out and trusting my gut to say yes.
I like that answer. I would love to hear if anyone has something to bounce off from that idea of even just that it's maybe not a dichotomy so much as your way doesn't have to be not the right way. You're just making it the right way.
For me, it's funny. I read a book a couple years ago that someone just gifted to me again.
You can move it even closer. Emma.
That is about the crossroads of should and must. And I think we often live in a world of shoulds. Some path has been set out before us that someone has decided, or there are expectations around that. Whether that's in your job or your family life or whatever, the must piece is what's inside you, and how do you figure out what your must is. It's that idea of honoring who you are, figuring out your values, what you stand for, where you want to go, and saying screw the rules. Just doing what you need to do to be yourself.
I think for me, it's sort of bouncing from that idea as well. It's also, there's people that have been there, that have done it before you, and that know better. And so to me, it feels very comfortable to go up to the individuals that know it better than I did, to ask them, hey, listen, this is what I'm trying to do. How could you help me? How could, and more than 90% of the chance they will help you, or they'll tell you how to go and about and doing it. And from there on, it's just basically following through. It's okay to make mistakes, you know what I mean? I've made tons, but am I afraid to fail? No, but just continue on doing it, and then, learning from that, and then continue on to doing it. But there's not a perfect time for you to shoot for, or wait for, it's just shooting and then making the corrections then afterwards. There's not a moment that you can aim for and say, this is what that's what I'm going for. It's just, going for it, and then afterwards making the adjustments and that are necessary to whatever application, in life you're trying to make that aspirations to. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I'm really just honored to be here, and I feel the spirit of what everybody is saying here. I feel like I have done everything the wrong way. But the wrong way is helped me to find out who I am and what God let me live for. And so I feel like in the tradition of, enslaved people, that I have inherited that tradition of making a way out of no way. Who would have ever thought I would be a full professor at Ohio State University? Nobody. And to figure out myself as I got into the academy, because I never thought I would be in the academy. I just escaped the street life and went to school, and then I never stopped going to school because I was scared I would get back in the street life and lose my kids. But I've been figuring out that I can still be who I am in the academy. And, people might not like me, might not understand me, might not like the fact that I wrote a book called Po-Ho on Dope to PhD. He looking at me like, ooh. But it's okay, because I wrote that book for who is supposed to get it. For people who feel like they can't make it in the academy. And not just in the academy, but anywhere. So I feel like all my wrongs have helped me to make a way for myself and to keep trusting, like you said, trust your gut. And everybody has kind of gone with that, So I've been trusting my gut. Sometimes I make a mistake, and maybe I wasn't going with my gut, but I find my way back to, what I'm supposed to be doing.
Well, first of all, I want to just applaud you on a seamless plug integration into what you shared. Go buy Dr. E's book, Po-Ho on Dope to PhD. I've read it. It's actually really good. Challenging, emotional.
Which she'll be performing tomorrow night.
That's right. Another sweet plug, less seamless.
I'll be performing after Javier.
Yeah. Javier and Dr. E will be performing solo shows back-to-back tomorrow night at Strike Theater, connected to Giant Steps. I was going to try and plug it a little more seamlessly, but I think we'll just go naked plugging. That works fine. One thing listening to you all now and sort of looking at the work I'm able to see that you all do is you're all doing things that I think people understand. You're an educator, you're an organizer, you're a designer, you're a restaurateur. Like, those are all things people know, like, that's a practice that happens. But what I see is that you are doing your version of those things. And so I wonder how much you have thought about or continue to think about, am I trying to make something people want, or am I trying to find out which people want the thing that I am equipped to make or do? Like, what do you do with that question about? Because I think one thing we try to do about going the right way is, what are people already into? So you can make a restaurant, but if you're like, well, people really love hamburgers, you have clearly not done hamburgers. Like, that's not what you make. It's a lot more lentils than I've seen in hamburgers. So I wonder how you've thought about, has that question been a question in your mind as you're making decisions about your work and keep starting ideas and making new things and continuing the things you make now?
It's interesting. I think it's pretty easy to slip into the traditional version. It's what we're taught. It's what we know. It's what's been modeled. When you start to look at how you want to do your own work, for me, actually, you come up with better product, with better processes, more connections. It's fascinating when I think about when I was trying to do my work in somebody else's version of that, fitting in a box. I was, square peg, round hole. I was a misfit in an organization or in a number of organizations where I just didn't fit a role very well. I think that's probably a commonality of many people in this room is we don't necessarily fit a box. So how do we take things that we've learned, things we've been taught, and expand our box? In whatever field that is, it doesn't mean you have to start from scratch or from zero. You're just building on what you've been taught. I feel like when we do that, we actually bring a lot more creativity, passion, connection to whatever it is that we've chosen to do. We make it ours. Yeah.
That's truthful. I mean, I'm in the restaurant industry, and as many of you guys know, it's one of the hardest industries to survive. And to see a restaurant survive for 5 years, what was the rate? 99%, I think, 98 and some percent right now is the failure rate of restaurants. To see a restaurant open in 20 years is 1 of 100 of, basically it's impossible. And so when I'm fighting against those ads as an artist, as an entrepreneur, as a chef, I can't go with the usual stuff and going with the comfort of opening something that's already been written out for me, or it's not going to go well for me. So what I've seen in the success of my restaurants that I've opened up over the years is that wherever I'm going to, whether it was New York or California, that people were looking for something different, and I've obviously stuck to what was my comfort, but bringing it out. So, for example, the cuisine background I come from is Somali, East African, Kenyan, Ethiopian. And those flavors are sort of still being explored. So when I took my restaurant to New York in 2015 in Harlem, there was a market that was open to me because I was the only restaurant in New York City that was of Somali cuisine. So that itself, it spoke of huge in terms of what was missing. And because I saw that and I had that ability to go make a difference, it also, we had tons of write-ups. And on this block that we were in, which is on 116th Street, people would not come from downtown or any other parts of New York City to come and dine in this part in Harlem. And this small restaurant that I opened in the middle of 116th, between 7th and 8th, had a lineup after the first month that was curving around the block. I mean, people were waiting. And I didn't know how to react to that. But it's because I was able to take something that wasn't there. It wasn't available, and there was a need for it. And that's and of course I love the industry I'm in and what I do, but because I saw a need that there was, and I was able to act on that and and see the results afterwards. So a month after, we had a write-up on New York Times. They named us the best African restaurant in New York City, and that was a huge deal for us. And then right after that, being named by the I think the Village Voice and so on, and it just basically opened more doors. And I think it's just being able to get out of the comfort zone, not being afraid to see there's something that you can do, a difference that you can make. Your passion, of course, will take you, and money will come afterwards. But don't be afraid, and take those chances and explore. That's I don't know.
Can I poke at you for a
Yeah,
second?
go for it, please.
So you and Dr. E both said something about, and I know I'm not the moderator.
Go ahead.
I apologize.
You're doing great.
About making mistakes and about failure. And I think the fear piece around that is what holds most people back of like, what if I screw up? What if I don't do this right? And yet, I would say we probably all feel like we've gotten where we are because of the lessons we've learned from just going and doing and learning from every single time we make a misstep. How do we tweak it? What do we do with that? And that's the difference in where are we taking whatever it is that we do? How do we learn from it as opposed to be paralyzed by fear? I mean, you've done some pretty awesome things.
And I think it's, I'm not saying, while all that was happening, that there was other hardships, and but to get past that and to be able to, not be afraid of failure. Honestly, it's, it goes hand in hand, success and failure. I mean, how do you, you can't walk on eggshells. It's and success is not easy. If you want to get to the other side, you're going to go through, hardships. It's going to be, many forks on the road, but those makes you stronger. It's like the stripes that you carry over time. And it comes through for you. And I don't know.
You mentioned both eggshells and forks. You're really on brand. It's really impressive. Well, I'm going to throw it to the sofa over here.
Repeat the question one more time.
Well, I think the question's evolving, so let me see if I can sort of capture this idea, which is, I think, can you speak to your personal relationship to fear and failure, and whether it is, what is it like living through that experience? Because you say like we learn from those failures, but in the middle of them, you don't feel like you're learning. It just feels painful. So I wonder if either of you can speak to that idea of, sure, you've done things and things have not always worked out, and you are where you are as a result. But what do you do with your brain, or is there a practice to get right with that failure, or to not let that fear control you, or what do you do with that stuff? Just point at each other.
I'm scared now. I mean, really, that fire is in my stomach every time I talk in front of people. And Luther Vandross said one time that when you stop getting that fire, you need to stop. So I guess, I'm still going. I watch a lot of women who don't fit in boxes. So like I watch Maya Angelou old clips of speaking and reading her poetry. I watch Whoopi Goldberg's one-woman show. I listen, I try to pay attention to people who don't fit in boxes, like you said, because I know I don't. I'm a woman of a certain age. I was turned out to human trafficking at 13, and I thought that was my identity for a long time. Like, I didn't feel like a normal person would want to be my friend, my lover, or anything like that. And so I get a lot of inspiration from people who I see as outside the box. What was the rest of that you said? Fear and...
Yeah, can you identify what you've taken away from a failure, or
from a failure? I'll give one example. So the guy who taught me a lot about songwriting, that was my friend. When I first started working with him, he used to always try to tell me, think about Brandy when you write this song, or think about Destiny's Child. Because we want to write commercial stuff, And eventually, I was doing everything he told me to do because he was a Billboard award winner. So I was listening to him, But over time, I started saying, I don't want to do it that way. I feel like it should go this way. And one of the first songs that I started, trust in my gut as far as what I wanted a song to say and what I wanted to sound like on a song, that song was on just last January. It was on Fox Star. So I'm like, I'm going to start trusting myself more instead of letting dudes boss me around when we produce it, And also for that book, PhD to PhD, I mean, it's got a lot of cussing, because that's what, I wrote from my experience, and that book has made me get more encouragement from people everywhere that I've read the book, or people who've read the book, and it's all kinds of different people who have read that book, and they like the authenticity of it, and I feel like I'm connecting with what I'm supposed to be doing, rather than writing my books for an academic audience that only people in applied linguistics will read, which is like a handful of people. You know what I mean? So I think that I'm getting or living my dream or living my purpose more by being scared and doing stuff the way that I'm doing it.
So when I started working as an organizer and then became president of a labor union, so the idea of being different was just sort of, I'm a gay Puerto Rican labor leader in Minnesota. Like there was no normal way to do being a labor, like that was not available to me. And I work a lot in politics, and in the early days of Twitter, I would like sometimes be on TV as a political commentator, and then all these like right-wingers would call me a thug because I'm a union leader, and I would just answer and be like, dudes, I am in pastels, like, yeah, like just like update your invective, and for me in Minnesota, just generally, I just feel on the outside looking in ways that I really like. But so being the different thing has always been sort of that's just the path that I take, that I have to. I think in terms of failure, so here's the seamless plug. The show that I'm doing tomorrow night, storytelling show called A Resister's Handbook for Holding On to Optimism in Shitty Times, is about both successes and one really big, just traumatic and failure that I had as a leader of the union, which was with a situation where there were no good options when our union, which is overwhelmingly immigrant and people of color, suffered an immigration raid, and so we tell the story about how we handled that and decisions I made and such, and that experience and the resulting good period of time of just feeling like I had changed careers and made a name for myself and felt on top of the world, and then suddenly felt like there was nothing that I could do right, that felt like robbed of purpose, and sort of clawing my way back from that failure and that very harsh self-assessment about the failure. Eventually, like now I feel on the other side of that and feel like a different and better leader. It did not feel that way at the time. It just felt like hell at the time. So if anyone had said to me in the middle of that, like, your failures are just going to make you better, I would have punched them in the face. I'm like, yeah, that's...
Because you're a thug.
Because I'm a thug.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not really helping my... Yeah.
No.
But now, it's interesting because I feel that way, but also am deeply connected to that feeling of just utter hopelessness when I was in the middle of a failure. So I don't know, like... I don't want to be that person now to say someone who's going through a failure like, you're going to be stronger at the end of this. Yeah, because I know how I would have reacted at the time.
Well, it can be wildly condescending. Like, yeah. Well, I want to try, because we could just dig into this deeper and deeper. And I, of course, love that story. Everyone should go watch tomorrow. But I wonder if y'all can think of specific examples of... Because everything you're doing is about putting deeply personal elements into your work. And there are a lot of models in the world of like, you go do your work, and then you go home and have a life, and there's some sort of separation. I don't practice that. I don't really know how to do that. But I'm curious if you all could speak to ways when that has been, like, how do you protect yourself if you're if you're making food that's deeply personal to you and to your culture, and then someone rejects that, it's a rejection of you in some way. And if you're doing designs that are about what you feel is going to really impact somebody, and they like say they hate it, then how do you make sure they're not saying like you telling your story, if someone's like, it didn't move me, then they're like, you didn't move me, you did, like, there can be an erasure or a denial of your experience in that. So what do you do with that part of putting so much of yourself into, going your own way is also sharing yourself a bit more? How do you handle that? How do you manage that? Or do you not, and you just bleed and suffer?
You know what? I feel like that even in being a professor at Ohio State, because my research is kind of, connected to my experience of being an Ebonic speaker, my mother being a Jamaican who spoke Creole, Jamaican, English, and feeling like everywhere I went, somebody was saying something about how I talk. So I wasn't Ebonic enough for, American Ebonics enough for my friends, and I wasn't Jamaican enough for my family members when I go to Jamaica. And so when I found out that there was a major in applied linguistics, and I could learn about Creoles and Black linguistics, and it gave me a sense of pride, and I had knowledge about where these languages came from, these ways of speaking came from, and it had these West African backgrounds, and they taught us about, the systematicity of all of that. So when people look at my syllabus or they look at my classes, and they're like, and these are people who are going to be teachers, so you need to know something about how folks in the hood speak, right? You need to know something about that if you're going to be a teacher, especially if you are saying that you want to be an urban educator. But people look at my syllabus sometimes and they don't come back. And I say, yay, because it's for the people who want to know. It's for the people that God let me live to be able to present this body of knowledge to, who want to work with these populations. I feel the same way about everything. It's like, I know what God has for me is for me, and what he has out there for me to do is going to connect with the people it's supposed to connect with. So I don't worry about it anymore. I don't.
Does that answer for all of you? You're all that deeply grounded and powerful?
Yeah,
Oh, good.
I
Congrats.
think to right after that, I think in my industry, sort of, I really don't run into much of that, but there's a term that I use, the haters, you know what I mean? And it's and being able to use that also as, because there's a lot of people that will critique you for who you are and what you're doing, so, and poke holes in your as a person, and but if you look at every character out there is taken, so the idea is to be more original to yourself, and if there's people poking holes, I think that there's a term that my friends use as well. They say brush the haters off, you know what I mean? That's it. And keep it moving forward, and don't let that stop you, you know what I mean? And conforming is the worst thing you could do to yourself, and accepting that. Seriously, it's the worst thing. So, it's, and there was something I recently learned this week as well. There's a learned hopelessness, so it's also taught to you. It's not to be hopelessness, it's pressed on you by others or, or society or so on, but don't conform. That's the worst thing, and just be you, original, the person you can be the most, and everything, every person out there, every character, don't be nobody else. Find inspirations in them and see like, hey, that's the route they took, and maybe, this is what I need to do myself, and take my own, find who you are and find your own route and take that, Just, everybody else is taken, that's it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. We should all be more like you and not conform.
Exactly, no, kidding.
So I have two different jobs. One of them is I am sort of an interior designer. I do a lot of strategy work. I design a lot of spaces, primarily commercially. And so this idea of, am I being judged, is sort of what it comes down to. A piece of that is recognizing that I don't fit for every client. Every client doesn't fit for me. It is not just consumption, and what we do is not just a commodity. There are projects that we've gone after where, we're a very small firm. We tend to collaborate, we curate teams, we try to be very specific for clients that are the kind of people we want to work with. I have this joke of there are a lot of firms who try to do all things for all people. We are not Walmart. We do not carry your groceries and your ammo and your underwear all in one place. So how do you find the right people to be working with? And then how do you tap into what it is that you're trying to get to? What are the problems that you're trying to solve? What's this thing that you want to tap into? And so for us, there's a process that we go through that is much more about discovery and less about what we're trying to impose upon someone. But that is actually where our design comes into play, is in problem solving, in recognizing what the issues actually are, and then solving to those. So that's the design piece, and do people like it or not? We've been really fortunate that we, over many years and the various iterations of firms, have been, won awards and been published and those things, but that's just icing. I mean, the best piece is when a client comes back and they're successful because we've helped them be successful. That's when we're successful. That answers part of the question, but the other piece is this Scout Workshop, which is something that I'm building right now. We have approached this in the same sort of way of asking a lot of questions of people, and also trying to figure out what do we want to make for ourselves, and not trying to be the fit for everyone. So Scout Workshop is sort of a creative collective. It's very much curated. It's not a, hey, I'm going to give you some money and sign up, and it's a co-working space. It's sort of like co-working on steroids meets IDEO. It's not tested. I can't tell you that everyone's going to sign up. We're supposed to have an ask at the end, all of you, have coffee with me, we can chat if you think you might fit. But this idea of is it going to fail? It might. I hope not. I'm not trying to be here for everybody. I'm trying to find my people and build a community around values that are people who believe in that. It is not. Someone asked me recently, well, are you trying to be, WeWork or Coco or some of these more well-known places? And I'm like, no, there's enough room for all of us. Are you trying to be McDonald's?
Definitely not. Hell no.
And I find it, this is going to sound glib, but in Minnesota, I find it fairly easy to be different in the sense that, most Minnesotans, if they don't like what you're doing, won't tell you.
They'll tell me.
They'll tell people around you.
Yeah.
Or they'll use euphemisms that I won't understand, or that sound like compliments but aren't. But what is, and it'll sound glib, but what is actually helpful about that is that, because those moments when I do find out that someone has talked to someone else or whatever, I realize that not having heard that has allowed me to move forward, and at that point I decide whether I care or not, and often I don't. Sometimes I do, and then I'm annoyed that the person didn't tell me directly, but most often I think there's a sort of freedom, and I think if we can just sort of act like everyone around you is Minnesotan and not telling you, and just sort of trudge ahead, you can just do the different experimental sort of thing, and not worry about what other people are saying. Assume they're not talking at all, which is wrong.
And can I just add this?
Of course.
When you meet the people that you really connect with, and they tell you how important what you are doing is to their life, it could be millions and millions of haters, but it's worth it for the people that that you helped.
Which is a huge reason why you should tell someone if they did something that impacted you, which is what Minnesotans also will not do. So that's the part I would like more of. Just talk to someone else about the anger or the disappointment, but go tell someone if they were amazing. Just to give everyone a heads up, we're just a few minutes away from the Q&A time. This is my fun reminder that questions end with a question mark. I'm not too worried about everyone in this room, but that's a thing that often people forget in conference situations. So just start preparing your questions. and try to avoid them being statements. What I'm going to sort of throw to all of you before we move into that, first of all, is if there's any questions for you have for one another. I think I don't doubt you'd already be asking those things. But I also want to know, because you have this intertwining of your personal and your professional work, I want to know how that sits with your personal relationships, whether that is, you've collaborated with somebody and there can be a muddiness about, do we share the same values in this project? There also can be a thing where if you're working on something that is connected to your life, you're making some decisions about how it impacts people who are also connected to your life. Like, how do you manage those aspects of this sort of forging your own way? There can be collateral damage when you yourself are faced with something that doesn't go how you want it to go. Or even when you succeed, it can impact the people you love in ways that land strangely. So what do you do with that?
I'm going to say
Go for it.
respectful conversation and transparency. I was noting earlier, I don't think any of us up here are native Minnesotans, which has actually served me quite well over time, because it means that I say things that maybe I shouldn't. But that's just how I work. And so when I'm collaborating with someone, or I have a personal issue, or dealing with relationships, this idea of putting things on the table, not in a confrontational way, but in a, here's this thing, we should maybe talk about this thing, and figure out what we do with this thing before it becomes something that is festering, or we become resentful about, or we're saying things behind your back because you suck. Yeah, so it's really about this honesty, transparency, integrity, all that.
There is I think, for me to get into my business and me to be able to do what I do, I would have to have great relationships with all my partners and people that I work with. And, what I like, I've been lucky, I suppose, having to meet all the, my partners and working with all these great individuals that would bring, the other half of what I don't have, which is the, where there's a marketing experience and so on. So there's complementary of our talents. So we're not overshadowing one another, and we're not taking away each other's jobs. Like you said, having that fluid of conversations daily on a weekly basis. Because when something goes unsaid for a long time and you haven't discussed your business issues, it just sort of gets into an area where I don't like, and I think having that daily conversations, having, committed to one another, it's important. And there's a word, JAG, that I used to hear from my uncle. I mean, it's, jealousy, arrogance, and greed. Those are, something to steer clear from. And I think if any of those ever comes into your business, you're doomed to fail. I mean, it's the worst, and I think it's something that I try absolutely hardest to, if I'm partnering up with somebody to address that. That's some and some of the things I don't like. So we're getting into a relationship. We know what to expect from one another, and from the get-go, and then we have that discipline, to follow through and be able to respect one another as well. And it is important, absolutely. And I think when you talk about doing the wrong thing, that is doing the wrong thing, which. Not discussing that, or having, to get into a relationship from the get-go that didn't have much description, what your job duties are and so on. And that's my personal experience. Yeah, I don't know.
Can either of you speak to JAG?
Jealousy, arrogance, and greed.
Greed.
Well, I think of myself as a free agent. I work with a lot of musicians, but I'm not in a band per se, so I'm hiring in people to play with me. And because I have a plantation job, I'm not a gigger. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people, they have to do that because, like they don't, that's their job is, that's their only income is playing music. And so I try to respect that, and I know that people can't rehearse the way that I need them to rehearse for me to present myself the way that I want to be presented. But there's a certain level of professionalism that I need. And I need people to know that if you take a gig with me, you know, I'm gonna need you to know my music, and when we show up for rehearsal, you're not gonna be listening to the record. At rehearsal, you're gonna know the music. You know, you're gonna treat me like I'm, you know, a professional, because I'm treating you and I'm paying you as much as I possibly can, to show you that, you know, I'm respecting your skill set. And I need that back from people. And I need you to not overplay me. You know, even though I like to scream, but I don't want to scream over the band. You know what I'm saying? I want it to sound like I need it to sound. And sometimes when you're a woman and you're dealing with all men, you know, people might think you a B. And I can get that vibe from the ones who think I'm a B, and I don't call them anymore because they just can't vibe with me on that vibration like, you know, I am the boss because I'm paying you, you know, and I love you. And I can be your auntie, I can be your mama, you know, however you know. But if I'm a B, because you can't understand what I'm saying, I don't need you anymore. And so I just keep trying to gravitate to the musicians who love me, and I love them, and I treat them right, and they treat me right and give me what I need.
Well, I want to open up the room. So if anyone has questions, we can get mics to you. So put a hand up or stand up, and we'll get a mic right over to you, and you can ask a question. I think it's happening. It's really happening. Oh, she's passing it out. Great. Well, now we're just pausing. This is just awkward. Yeah. This is all planned.
We'll try this again?
Yeah.
Perfect. Hi, I'm Lisa Harris. My question for you is, clearly the four of you are here on stage because of your accomplishments and all the things that you have done throughout your career to get to where you are. And what I'm doing now as an author, poet, and a champion for women's empowerment is really talking about bravery and beauty within. And so my question for you is, what is the bravery, what is the human element of your failures? Can you walk us through? I know Javier did, talking about that instance when you were really down. For me, I learn best when I hear about that failure that really shifted your path to success.
So I'm going to answer in a way that may not be exactly what you're looking for. Failure for me was being a doormat. I used to be a doormat. I had something happen in my life when I was in my late 20s where I lost somebody who was really close to me, and she was my rock. And what happened was, personally, there was a shift that happened where I had to start asking myself, what's holding me back from living the life I want to live? What am I afraid of? What is failure? Because most things I can survive. Can I, is failure like somebody doesn't like me? So what? Is failure that I lose all my money? I'll figure it out. I think defining what failure is to you, and for me it became, what's the worst that can happen? And I have to write that down. And the second question is, can I live with that? And more often than not, I can live with that. I can't live with not trying. So thinking about failure, it's really, what is your perspective of that? I think we often get into, somebody else's version of what success is as well. Failure is not trying.
I want to see if anyone else has questions. We can still speak on this, but I want to just pan and see if there's someone else who has a question they're waiting to ask too. Yeah.
Hey there, my name is Louis McCaleb, aka Louis Blaze. I'm a young artist, future author myself. And just sitting here, I was really inspired by you all, because I want to eventually be in a position you're at. So my question for you would be, what advice would you have to give to an upcoming entrepreneur?
This is gonna sound trite. but saying yes to unexpected to unexpected offers, unexpected opportunities. I think that I was an academic who then started working, volunteering on political campaigns, and then was hired by this union as a political organizer. And 6 months into my first job as a political organizer, my boss says to me that he thinks, that the other folks in the union think that I should lead this union, that I should become president of this union. And I thought, you are high. Because I had been teaching history a year before to college students. I didn't know anything about the labor movement. And I said yes, I did that. It has been the most profound thing in my life, really, to have at that moment just taken a leap to do something that I did not feel in any way ready to do. And I think that there's always a balance in career-wise and in creativity between these, building your talents, building the things that you are good at, and then reaching a moment when you're pushing yourself, when you're stretching, and saying yes to that moment of stretching, of trying something new and different. And for me, that has been also just about being willing to redefine myself career-wise. One of the weird things that I do as a labor leader here is started performing as a storyteller and just doing that and not caring what others think about that.
That's great. Again, we can keep going. I just want to make sure if there's someone else who has a question, I'll add that to the slate as well. I don't know if anyone's got something they're burning to ask, but otherwise we can keep speaking on either of those two questions.
I think I would like to respond to my guy here. I think for the advice I would give you is, surround yourself with people, like, say, for example, the industry that you want to get into, and you want to be an entrepreneur, and what industry do you want to make that, you want to go into the restaurant industry? Do you want to go into, what industry? So put yourself out there and be around people that are of that field, I guess. Put yourself around that. And even though, you might not have the money at the time, and something will happen for you in terms of, because you're thinking of it daily and you're, around this, environment. And I think, you're exposing yourself to the opportunity of, eventually owning your, I know restaurants, so, right? I mean, if you want to be in the restaurant industry and you want to own your own restaurant, then you got to work in a restaurant. You got to know how the back house works. You got to know how the management works. How the kitchen works. Once you figure all that stuff, and then it'll make sense to you on what you need to do next. But exposing yourself to the field you're going into is my number one advice. And that's that. And regarding failure, I suppose, since I don't know if there's another question. Failure, what it means to me, I think personally, man, I failed so many times. I don't know which one to tell you. All right. I think it's, for example, I think one of the hardest one for me personally, each one is, different. And, it was personally, here in Minnesota, being married and, having 2 restaurants operating, running, and having to lose that, have a divorce and falling behind in taxes, your license, liquor license being pulled from your restaurants. I've been on all those ends, and I think, it gets really dark, it's, and you feel like there's no way out, no one to pull you out. And even, like, right when that time was happening to me, it was like about 4 years ago. It wasn't even that long. And, I decided to, try somewhere else. I had to not be in that predicament at all times. And I knew I had to make a move. I had to, if the other interesting part was they, my personal accounts were also put on hold as well. So there was all these things that were happening, right? How do I fight out of that? And so when I left and went to New York, this was all happening here in home, and I needed to figure out. So by pulling myself out of the circle and taking myself to New York and looking back, saying I need to solve this, having the right team behind me, my lawyers and so on. But by being active, and doing, something about it, sort of, gradually, I came out of that darkness, so I couldn't be in there. You can't let your failure decide your fate, you have to dig yourself out. And by fighting it daily, coming out of there, and then there's no greater feeling than when you're, above all of that again, and coming, from, losing almost everything, and then restarting again, and then knowing what it was like in the beginning, say, for example, when I started from nothing, to have that feeling all over again, and then make it back. I'm telling you, I don't know how to describe that. I know maybe we can have a discussion afterwards, but it is absolutely one of the most beautiful things, You fell once, you fell twice, you fell 3 times, 4th and 5th, and so on. Eventually, it's like you get to learn to get up again, and brush off and keep going. And in a way, it teaches you a discipline as well, because you've been there so many times. It's nothing, you're going to do it again. But you learn those lessons not to repeat it, to fail again, But it should not be something that keeps you, sorry.
No, I like that. If you're broke, go to New York.
Go to New York. The greatest idea. It will definitely make you.
Hi. I had a question because you bring up something important as far as being an entrepreneur. We kind of have a lot of challenges within our relationships and with our mental health just because of the natural ups and downs of being self-employed. What types of things can a person do to help keep their mental status flexible, you know what I mean, and help kind of mitigate some of the damage that happens just, from doing what we do?
All right, I love that question. So I'll say I'd like each of you to respond to that, and then we'll go into each of you sharing what you need from the room. So thank you very much for that question. So if each of you could speak to that idea of taking care of yourself and the mental health component.
So when I left here, it was really dark, like I was just and the other thing is, I come from this, background of my culture, and, divorce is something that's frowned upon. Business failure is something that's frowned upon, and it's, I have this, the community that was looking up to me, kids that were looking up to me, and so on, and all this stuff, and when you get to think about that, and it just sort of, you think of one thing and it sort of becomes a lot, some other stuff and so on and so on. And the thing is, to move for me was to keep it moving, what I mean, to get up and, be able to not be afraid of that, and just, I don't know, I think it's, I think moving was one thing, and not running away from it, but fighting it as well, and getting up, and everybody's different, experience might be different, but I think don't let that push you down, and having to have someone to talk to is very important as well, whether it's family and friends, or someone very close to you. Those relationships are important as well. It takes you over those moments, and
I have 2 sort of pieces of advice. The first is really surrounding yourself with people who are going to make you better. Not the cynics, not the... Finding a way to look at things from a positive standpoint, because things do get hard, and you need to be able to talk to people, but you also need to continue to be bolstered up and to bolster other people up. An exercise that I was doing for a while when I was really struggling was writing down my fears and then writing down what I was grateful for. And what was really fascinating is they were the exact same. And it took me taking the time to put them down of, why am I feeling so anxious? Why am I not sleeping? Well, it's because I'm terrified of XYZ, but I'm grateful for XYZ. And being able to step back from that and think, okay, I have a lot to be thankful for. And yes, it's a struggle. Yes, it's hard. But how do we shift the perspective around that? Because the alternative isn't very good.
So like in organizing and in social justice work, there's a lot of burnout. People get burnt out, and that's how I felt in that really dark moment that I had. And the way I thought of it, and I think a lot of people, when they burn out in social justice work, it's that you see a lot of pain you experience it, and even if it's not your personal pain, you are empathizing with the pain of others, and it could be overwhelming. And for me, that the lesson that I learned out of that failure was that, because I would think to myself, well, this work would be so much easier if there was less of this stuff and more joyful stuff, and really like that, just learning that you can't really, when you work in social justice, wish for a world of less pain, and because the work of social justice is to transform that pain into joy in some way. But also that you, in acknowledging that, for me, it came out of searching for and finding silence. I'm ADHD, and I am at my most efficient when I am crazy busy. Right. I'm from Puerto Rico, and the hurricane and the islands. In the last few weeks, I've just been kept myself insanely busy because it kept me going, and so I used to think that I was someone who could never do something like meditation, because it was that's crazy. And it's actually that looking for silence and just being away and on my own and with my thoughts. At what has been the best thing for me that took me out of a dark period, but also that helps keep me focused and away from being burnt out.
I think my response to this sister and to you about the dark time and about the mental health and spiritual health, I broke my cardinal rule, which was to never date a dude that was a musician, because all my musician friends are my brothers, and I got tricked by this guy. But anyway, he was playing me, and I found out, and it really crushed me, because we had started a record label together, and I was like, oh, I finally found. And he wasn't nothing but a square nerd player. But anyway, because I was used to street players, I know you slick, and I'm gonna accept that. But now at this time, I'm like, oh no, I want what God has for me, and it wasn't what God had for me. But anyway, I went to therapy. I was so crushed, because I was in my office at Ohio State University, melting down, talking to this guy on the phone and saying every word that I knew from the streets, and people can hear it in the hallway. I was melting down. And I went to therapy, and I had never been to therapy before. And I found this black woman that I could just tell all this stuff to. And she told me, she said, you have never grieved anything. From the time you were raped at 13 to having an abortion, to being with all these pimps and all these things that near death. Your parents dying. I had never grieved anything. And so I just laid on her couch and I grieved my ass off. And I guess I'm kind of, even though I'm a shy person, I'm kind of extroverted as well. Because if I vibe with you today, I can start telling you some shit that happened to me, and get that sisterhood thing, or that brother and sister thing going. And it helps me to talk to people who empathize with me, and I empathize with them. Some of the stuff that you guys have already said, and just taking care of it and knowing that I'm still human. I made some mistakes, and at the end of the day, I can recover. I can recover, and it all is helping me grow.
That was beautiful. I already know what I didn't know I needed, and now I'm taking away from today is permission to just sometimes grieve my ass off. So thank you for that.
On my lap. On my lap.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's assumed. We're all gonna take a turn laying in Javier's lap, grieving our asses off. So now what I'd like to do is have each of you just let the room know what it is you need from them. What can we all do for you who are sharing and doing so much for our communities and for us right now. And I want to also let you, Javier and Jamal, speak to some other prominent issues. So maybe I'll jump to Heather to just talk about like what do you need, and we'll come back around.
I need a drink. No, I don't actually need a drink, but I do like to drink coffee, beer, wine, old fashions. You know,
So drink list. Everyone make a drink list.
Actually, what I need is to connect people. It's a little bit of what I do. Is I love finding misfits and figuring out ways to connect with them or connect them with other misfits. And I use that term. I also use the term weirdos, but some people don't like that. So reach out. There's actually someone sitting out here, I won't name names, I'm pointing at her right now, that I had coffee with earlier this week, and it's like, I know the right people to connect her with, and I want to do that. We all need advocates. I need advocates, but I know there are people in this room who need advocates, and I'd love to do that.
Elaine, what do you need from all of us?
From everybody? Well, I don't know from everybody, but right now I'm at the place where I need more visual stuff. Like I got music, but I don't have visual stuff. So I'm looking to get into doing lyric videos, just music videos, all kinds of visual stuff that will help me promote my music as well as my nonprofit.
So people who can make and think visually.
Yes.
You need to build relationships with those people.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if there are people here that I need to connect with, I need to connect with you on that.
And Jamal, what do you need today?
First of all, I'm happy that I'm back in Minnesota, giant steps once again. Secondly, I would love, whatever you guys take from giant steps today, don't be NATO. You guys know the NATO? No action, talk only group. Take advantage of this network, and it's amazing. It's been one of the most beautiful things that can happen to me early in my career, and I hope that you guys can have the same experience. Next, I was born in a city called Mogadishu. Do any of you guys know where that is? Yes. And recently, last weekend, there was a devastating attack that happened to my birth city. And one of the biggest terrorist attacks ever, and it has been devastating in the sense of the magnitude of amount of people that died. It's right now estimated to be over 550 people, and so I would love for you guys to pray for them. And not only that, but me and my friends have been doing fundraising online, and I've also been doing a lot of cook-offs and so on to support the people back home. And I will see if I can attach it. It's a fundraiser on GoFundMe for Somalia. And if you guys can contribute and help out, that would be incredible. But also, if you can't, pray for us as well. I mean, anything that happens in one part of the other world also affects another, because we're all in this small ball together. And that's it. And thanks for listening today.
And Javier?
I think that's such a great question, what I need from you all. So I find that we live in such siloed lives that often people who have deep values of social justice but do different kinds of work are not organizers, sometimes feel like don't necessarily think of their skills as skills that could be helpful to the work of social justice. So we're always sort of trying to work with artists and at our union, and there's so much going on right now, and immigrants are under attack in so many different ways. And I think that whatever it is that you are passionate about and do well can help. We can find a way to make it, and I guess that's would be my ask, right? Is that whatever whatever talent or skill you have, if you can't think of a way to apply it to the work of social justice in the world today, think a little more or talk to people who are organizers and practitioners because I think there's always something. And then, so I mentioned I'm from Puerto Rico. I grew up there. My parents are there. My sister's there. It is these last weeks have been surreal. It is a really devastating situation there, and just sort of lays bare all of the ways in which Puerto Rico is just is in such a deeply unequal relationship to the United States. Although we are born U.S. citizens, so I am terrified at how we are gradually slipping from the news, and so remaining focused on the situation in Puerto Rico. If you can help financially, a national organization that I know and trust, and you can give money to is mariafund.org. It's a Center for Popular Democracy, and they work directly with organizers on the island who I personally know, and I believe they do good work. And here in Minnesota, the very small community of Puerto Ricans here has already sent over 100,000 tons of supplies to Puerto Rico. There are Puerto Rican doctors from the University of Minnesota who are in Puerto Rico right now and buying large amounts of medication. And so there are local efforts as well that you can contribute to. And the best way to find those is either talk to me or on Facebook, the Coalition of Boricuas in Minnesota, Coalición de Boricuas in Minnesota. Boricua is the word for Puerto Rican. But you can find that, or if you find me on social media, I'm always posting about it. Thank you.
So before we thank our panel, what I'm going to do is ask the room to commit out loud to stepping up and saying yes to some or all of these asks from our panel today. I would like to count to 3, and if you are willing to commit to doing at least one, if not all of those things, I want to hear you aloud say yes in unison as a group. I want us to actually commit to doing something. If you're not comfortable with that, stay silent, and your neighbor will judge you, but never tell you. So I'm going to count to 3, and then we're all going to say yes and commit to stepping up to these asks, okay? 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
Nice, excellent. Well, let's hear for Doctor E, Javier, Heather, and Jamal. And I'm going to welcome back to the stage Kevin and Susan.